A person in the renounced order of life, a sannyasi, is also called a sadhu because he renounces everything: his home, his comfort, his friends, his relatives, and his duties to friends and family. He renounces everything for the sake of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A sannyasi is generally in the renounced order of life, but his renunciation will be successful only when his energy is employed in the service of the Lord with great austerity. It is said here, therefore, bhaktim kurvanti ye dhridam. A person who seriously engages in the service of the Lord and is in the renounced order of life is a sadhu. A sadhu is one who has given up all responsibility to society, family, and worldly humanitarianism simply for the service of the Lord. As soon as he takes his birth in the world, a person who has so many responsibilities and obligations to the public, to the demigods, to the great sages, to the general living beings, to his parents, to his family forefathers, and to many others. When he gives up all such obligations for the sake of the service of the Supreme Lord, he is not punished for such renunciation of obligation. But if for sense gratification a person renounces all such obligations, he is punished by the law of nature. So here it said, such a sadhu engages in staunch devotional service to the Lord without deviation. Now, which sadhu is being referred to? The previous verse talks about what are the symptoms of a sadhu. The symptoms of a sadhu are that he is tolerant, merciful, and friendly to all living entities. He has no enemies, he is peaceful, he abides by the scriptures, and all his characteristics are sublime. So what does this sadhu do with such symptoms? For the sake of the service of the Lord, he renounces all other connections, such as family relationships and friendly acquaintances within the world. Actually, to genuinely progress in spiritual life, it is very important that we cultivate spiritual knowledge, jnana, and renunciation, vairagya. And if one is practicing devotional service, just like here it is said, engages in staunch devotional service to the Lord without deviation, naturally he will develop jnana and vairagya. If one is not developing jnana and vairagya, he is developing more and more attachment, he is again getting attracted to his family members. When he goes around meeting people, their possessions, their so-called comfortable house is catching his attention, then it's a good assessment that we are not progressing. In Vedic times, vairagya was very much sought for, and people would work for vairagya. In present times, vairagya is despised. It is not somebody who has a lot of vairagya, who does not have material attachment. He is not very highly thought of. That's why in Vedic times, brahmacharya ashrama, again rules and regulations, then grihastha ashrama, and knowing that ultimate goal of life is not to settle down peacefully in this material world, one would, although he is comfortably placed in family life, with his wife, with his children, the comforts of the house, he would start preparing to detach for vairagya, and that ashram is called vanaprastha. Prabhupada says that he with his wife, because sons would have grown up, he would have handed over his responsibilities, and with his wife he might go to places of pilgrimage, hear more about the Lord, cultivate detachment, cultivate attachment to the Lord, and finally, after 75 years, one would completely renounce even his family attachment, even his wife. So that is the way in which the whole life was structured. Ultimately, to sever all connections so that one can, with single-minded focus, attach oneself to the Lord. So here it is said, there is a very famous verse which all of us have heard many, many times, Prabhupada quoting. It's there in the Gita also. Devarshi bhutapta nirnam pitranam na kinkaram nayam rini charajan. We all are indebted, Prabhupada right here, that when a person takes birth, a person has so many responsibilities and obligations. Devarshi, to the devas, to the rishis, the sages. Bhutapta, to the public, to the general living entities, Nidam, to the parents, to the family members, the forefathers. But it is said that if one, Ya Sarvatma Sharanam Sharanyam, if one surrenders to Mukunda, who is worthy of surrender, who is our Supreme Father, who is our Eternal Father, then although one might not be able to fulfill those obligations, Prabhupada writes in the Prabhupada, he is not punished for such renunciation of obligations. That's why many times when devotees join, it is very difficult for the family members, his friends, other members to understand how he can be so callous, how he can be so reckless. Sometimes he may be the only son in the family. And it is beyond their comprehension. It defies all logic, all rationale. And that's why people even use the word, he's been brainwashed. Because from their perspective, it doesn't make any sense. A child who has been raised by the parents, they've invested love, affection, money, got him educated. Now is the time when he should be taking care of them, staying with them. And he says, no, Krishna is supreme and I want to serve him, even at the cost of not serving them. So many times devotees take this bold step. Even in this material world, we have examples of people who sacrifice their family interest for higher cause. Many times we hear these days, the India-Pakistan border, there's a lot of tension. And we hear sometimes some Jawans getting killed. Or recently there was an attack on the army camp and some Jawans got killed. And then we hear in newspaper how the body was brought back to the village and the family members are crying and all that thing. Now the person who is there in the army, posted in the battlefield in the border areas, he knows that he is risking his life for the country. Constantly there is tension and terrorism. The opportunity of meeting death for the sake of the country is much higher. Although death can come anywhere, anytime, anyone. But it is dangerous because day in and day out you are exposed to an environment where casualties can happen. Now a person knowing that very well, a person agrees, or rather could be, somebody may say it's a job, after all it's a livelihood, but for some people, for them it's there in their blood. I want to serve my mother for the sake of my nation. I am willing to lay down my life. And such people willingly go and take all risk to protect their motherland, to protect their country, to fight for their nation. Although they may have back home young wife, young children, maybe only one daughter, but the person is willing to take the risk for the sake of the country. And if a person gets killed, nobody says that he was callous. Nobody says that he was reckless, he left his family. He should have taken care of the family, because people understand that fighting for the country is a higher cause. In fact, they say that he's a martyr. He sacrificed his life. He's celebrated. His funeral happens with military honors. People salute him for his sacrifice. So here we see an example of the interest of the nation is higher than the interest of the family. And a person who, for the sake of country's interest, sacrifice the interest of the family, of his children, he is respected. He is not said that he has abnegated his responsibilities. So same way, unfortunately, just like this people can appreciate, but today's world, not many people have that understanding of sacrificing for the service of the Lord. That's why this is difficult for people to comprehend. Just like the country requires engineers, country requires doctors, architects, military men, army men, police people, all likewise country also requires people who are well versed in the scriptures. Prabhupada gives example, this is the duty of the Brahmanas, who, because they are learned, because they are enlightened, because they are educated, they can guide the administrators, the Kshatriyas, in ruling the kingdom. That's why in Varnashrama system, even though everyone was doing their respective duties, may not be directly engaged in devotional service. Vaishyas may be just doing their business, or workers may just be doing some work, but because the overall society was guided by the Brahmanas, everyone, by doing their respective duties, prescribed duties, was moving gradually in the right direction. And that is towards the ultimate goal of life, which is to surrender to Krishna. God realization or self-realization. So that's why you see this renunciation was celebrated in Vedic times. Unfortunately, because this knowledge is not prevalent in present day society, these concepts are not understood by people in general. Therefore, renunciation does not have much value. So here it said, for the sake of the Lord, he renounces all his family connections, such as family relationships and friendly acquaintances within the world. Many times when we come to devotional service also, we have to be little alert. Krishna says in the Gita, Devi Esha Gunamayi Mama Maya Dhuratya. And as we all have heard, Maya has many traps, gross and subtle. Sometimes a person with all good intentions might come to serve the Lord and might even so-called cut off his relationships with a single-minded focus, serve the Lord. But slowly, because Prabhupada has made an institution, because people from all walks of life, as Prabhupada started the movement, different devotees from different walks of life, from different backgrounds, from different cultures, from different countries, embraced Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada was at times lenient. Again, we cannot take his instructions in isolations from case to case. Many times when we read Prabhupada books, we can take the instructions of Prabhupada out of context. But Prabhupada, being an acharya according to time, place and circumstances, sometimes devotees may feel that apparently the instructions are contradictory. It's not. According to time, place and circumstances, keeping the principles intact, the application of the principles was done. So sometimes we can become more lenient, and again we can start developing attachment. Again start getting involved. Again getting, so to say, meddling with all the affairs in the family. And then slowly one gets pulled back. It has happened in the past, it can happen to anyone if we are not careful. So here it is said, as soon as he takes birth, he has obligation. One may even rationalize that, yes, I have obligation. They're dependent on me. There's no one to take care. But then here it is said, when he gives up all such obligation for the sake of the service of the Lord, he is not punished for the renunciation of obligation. And 6 principles of surrender, one of the principle is Avashya Rakshibe Krishna, I Vishwasa Palana. One should have the strong conviction that the Lord will protect. So here it is said, such a sadhu engages in staunch devotional service to the Lord without deviation. Sometimes we can make small deviation and then we get accustomed to that deviation and then it becomes a little more and a person can go completely tangent. So even this renunciation, jnana, vairagya, one has to very sincerely practice the principles, cultivate jnana and vairagya. One time in a particular city, there came one archer. He was very expert in shooting. So in a big maidan, all the people gathered and he was supposed to exhibit his archery skills. So he would take a bow, the arrow, and then right in front there was a board with all the circles. Typically in archery you have, and he started shooting. And all the arrows would go and hit the bullseye. And then just to show his expertise, he would sometime turn towards left and shoot, again he'll go and hit the center. There was one person in the gathering, in the crowd, who whenever he would see that the arrow has gone and hit the target, he would say nothing great about it. Nothing great about it. And all others in the public were completely amazed and they were cheering him and big round of applause. And he was also quite enthused when people are cheering up, and there's a big rasa there. So then sometimes he would turn his back and again shoot, again it'll hit, people will again cheer him up. So that was going on. But every time this particular person said, nothing great about it, so what? Nothing great about it, so what? And unfortunately the person who was shooting, he was hearing all this. Again he would try to show something, at least this time he should not say nothing great about it. He closed his eyes and shot. And again there's nothing great about it, so what? So he got a little worked up. After all display of his skills, he came to this man and he said, why are you saying nothing great about it? Nothing great about it. Why are you saying that? So he said, so what? After all, it's just a practice. You have practiced it many, many times. Now it has become, it's become a habitual thing to shoot. So what? So this person said, no. I mean, he was trying to rationalize that he's talented, he has such a skill. So this person said, you come to my place. So he was basically a milkman. And he invited to his house, made him sit. His wife came, he boiled the milk on the stove. And generally milkman, when they pour the milk on a glass, typically some devotees also do in the ashram. So from the top he poured the milk, from the can, the milk poured in the small little glass. And then from the glass back to the pan, again from the pan to the glass. And this time he increased the distance. Again the milk will fall. And again he'll put in the pan, again it'll fall. And this person was surprised. And not one drop of milk fell from the pan out of the glass. So he asked him, can you do this? This archer who was shooting the arrows, can you do it? So he said, it's difficult. So how do you do it? He said, just a practice. Just practice. Right from my childhood I have been doing it. Now I can close my eyes and do it. And then he actually took a pan and did it. So, many times we don't realize the acts which we do repeatedly, it becomes ingrained into our mind-body system and it becomes a habitual response. And something which we do time and again, we are not, they say, just like habit, it's like small little threads in the rope. They're small threads which are intertwined and then finally it goes and makes a big, huge, thick rope. So like that, whenever we act, do something, it's like a small thread in that big rope. And then if we repeatedly do, it becomes a habit, habitual response. So why Prabhupada has given us all these principles, the principles of devotional service, the 4 regulative principles, some element of tapasya, the fasting on some particular days, this all so that renunciation, vairagya, gets instilled in our mind-body system. Sometimes we may not even understand why we are supposed to do, why every day get up in the morning. That's why it says, such a sadhu engages in staunch devotional service to the Lord without deviation. Prabhupada uses the word suyantritau. Suyantritau means no discrepancy. Just like a watch, the machinery moves very systematically, no discrepancy. So if one practices, and sometimes we have to be also careful. Some devotees, by nature we have the habit of finding faults or complaining. And then we practice complaining. Every time we find something, we complain. Or we find a fault. And quite surprisingly, that becomes the nature. Because we have complained so often, we have found faults so often, fault finding becomes a nature. It gets ingrained. Even though there may be 100 good things to be happy about, a person would automatically, by default, pushed by his nature, will find fault. That's why actions done repeatedly. Prabhupada said, day after day we are chanting Hare Krishna. Day after day we are singing Guru Puja. Day after day we are attending Mangalarti and all the prayers. Day after day. Day after day we are going and bowing down in front of the deities. Day after day we are taking Charnamrit. Many times, seen in isolation, one might wonder why nothing is happening. But all these things are having cumulative effect. We all have heard about a person trying to hit the rock. One time he hit, there was no crack in the rock. Second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time, 10th time, 15th time. Nothing was happening to the rock. So a person said, what's the use? I'm hitting so often, nothing is happening to the rock. But the 21st time he hit, the rock split into half. So even our heart actually is very, very hard-hearted. They say, steel-framed. Prabhupada says, if we chant the holy names of the Lord, if tears don't fly from our eyes, if our hairs don't stand. So we are right now, because of so many anarthas, so much of conditioning, so many past bad habits, we are doing sadhana bhakti. Day after day, chanting, day after day, hearing Bhagavatam class and all those things. It might appear that it is not having an effect. It might appear that not much change is happening. But if we do it staunchly, it says, staunch devotional service to the Lord without deviation, with the faith in Guru's instructions, faith in the holy name. Sometimes we might even chant offensively, a lot of offenses. It is said that when we chant, it is sometimes okay, not okay in the sense we get distracted, we start talking to others, or on a particular day we may not be very attentive while chanting, or we may end up talking to others. Because conditioned soul has a lot of anarthas, has attachment for other things. Holy name is not very pleasing. It's understandable in a conditioned stage. But if a devotee, day after day, he enjoys talking, enjoys gossiping, enjoys discussing something while chanting, and if the chanting is not okay, if while chanting we are feeling sleepy, and he is not bothered about it, that's a very big, dangerous position. One day, maybe not feeling well, feeling sleepy, not feeling okay, consciousness is down, it's understandable. We end up doing prajalpa, we end up talking, we end up discussing something, we end up laughing, we end up doing something while chanting. Some days chanting may not be okay. Some day our hearing will not be okay, we are fully sleepy during class. One day, 2 days, it's okay. But if day after day and we are losing interest, and day after day while chanting we are doing all this talking and discussion, and we are completely complacent about it, it doesn't bother us, it doesn't, what am I doing? This question doesn't come in the mind, then one should really understand that he is in a dangerous condition. And here it is said that such a devotee who has severed his relationship with the family members, with the friends, with acquaintances, because there is some rasa there. If we don't get rasa in chanting, hearing, Bhagavatam, association of devotees, in devotional activities, if we don't get rasa there, we as conditioned soul, we want rasa. So where do we find rasa? Back in that relationship. Prabhupada uses harsh word. He says sometimes a worm in the stool comes out of the stool and again goes back. Because it's conditioned and finds that is much more comfortable. So it's very instructive. For the sake of the Lord, he renounces all other connections such as family relationships and friendly acquaintances within the world. It's applicable to all of us. For the sake of the service of the Lord, that's what we have done. And we have to be very careful. We have to diligently follow the principles and do what such a sadhu is supposed to do. And what is that? Engage in staunch devotional service to the Lord without deviation. If we do that, then day after day, suyantrita, we are following all the principles, then that jnana, vairagya, the detachment will be progressive in that state. And a time will come when we'll completely be detached from all the material things and be fully attached to the Lord. And that is what we should be aspiring for. Stop here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.